Tonight, we go to the hills of Auvergne in south-central France, in the early 17th century, where you walk as a mason and letter writer along volcanic slopes and chestnut groves, the air soft with damp earth and wood smoke, and a church bell tolls across the dusk. If you enjoy this gentle journey, please like and subscribe. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin our journey to a quiet village, gathering by the fire on All Souls' Night, where warmth, remembrance, and the glow of shared embers light the turning of the year. You reach the ridge as the light thins, after a day of steady walking that began with mist and bird song and has ended in a clean, cooling wind. Below you, the valley gathers its roofs like smooth, dark tiles tucked into the folds of pasture and rock, and a single plume of smoke marks the church, where the bell counts the hour in patient strokes. The air is touched with damp leaf and the slow sweetness of wood smoke, the odor that clings to wool and hair when autumn deepens, and you pause to breathe it as if it were a draught of water. Between the scattered fields, a green spreads like a small held breath, and in its center a great fire burns, steady rather than wild, sending its sparks up in unhurried constellations. The glow halos the figures gathered there, turning coarse cloth into something honeyed, softening faces into silhouettes of brow and cap and shawl. Your feet ache, and your shoulders remember each incline of the volcanic slopes, yet it is the sight of that ordered flame that tugs you forward. A ridge makes a kind of thought, a place to choose the next idea with care, and so you stand in the wind, feeling it press the worn brim of your hat, listening for what the evening decides. You take stock the way a mason measures a wall by eye, noticing the tilt and the flaws, and what can be shored up with a sure hand. On your back, the light pack rides easy but meaningful, tools wrapped in cloth so they do not clink, a mallet, chisels, a plumb line with its lead bob, the square you inherited from your first foreman. Inside your coat, the sealed letter from your last employer rests flat against your ribs, wax unbroken, its edges warmed by your body heat like a hidden ember. You have no coins sewn into your hem, no reassuring weight at your belt, only the work you know how to do, and the words you can set down clearly for those who ask for them. In these upland towns, still patching breaches and straightening lintels after the years of quarrels and sieges, there is need for steady hands, yet night sharpens suspicion, and a stranger at dusk can be a question people would rather not answer. You think of gates closed a heartbeat sooner than you reached them, of doors that stayed barred, of bread taken on the far side of a threshold with a muttered apology. The path down is narrow, a ribbon of pumice and soil stitched between low walls of dark stone that show their basalt bones where the winter streams have bit away at them, and it seems to say, choose and go. The bell speaks again, but now you hear something underneath it, a sound that is not the clang of iron, but the knitted thread of voices, low and even, and the sense of it turns the fire into a sign you know. In these hills, and across much of the long inland heart of the kingdom, people kindle the brandon des morts at the beginning of November, letting the first true cold season taste the smoke of a communal flame. The priest prays and the villagers answer, but there is an older rhythm in it too, a way of marking the year that keeps company with the church without dispute in it, blend in petition and memory with what the soil itself asks for. Bread is broken under the open sky, Chestnuts roast and crack in their shining skins, and a jug of the new wine passes carefully among hands that honor both the grapes and the names spoken aloud. When the prayers are done, someone collects embers on a shovel or in a small pail, and each household carries a coal home to catch on tinder. So the hearth burns with borrowed light that has seen everyone's faces. You have watched it before, in places where the roofs are thick with moss and the lanes are rutted with cartwheels, and you have seen the older women lift their shawls just enough to shield the coal from wind, as if guarding a christening candle. For those who kindled these fires in the 17th century, they are not charms to keep away imagined things. They are the ordinary labor of continuity, a way to say, we remember, we warm ourselves, we pass it along. The words Brandon de Morts and Feux de la Toussaint are spoken without hurry, as familiar as the names of the saints on the church walls and the names of the dead in the family yard. Hearing the voices now, solemn and unhurried, you know the hour and the shape of the evening, and you understand why the sparks lift as slowly as thought. You begin the descent with care, placing your feet where the sheep have chosen to place theirs, trusting their good sense more than your tired balance. The wind drops as the ridge falls away, and the smells grow stronger. Wet grass, the resin in the split logs, the faint iron tang that comes when fresh-cut stone is stacked and left to dry. A wall on your left is patched with a different stone, smoother and slightly green, perhaps taken from an older heap, and your hand finds the cooled sun in it, the memory of a day that has already slipped behind the hills. The road curves so you lose the fire and then regain it, as if a hand were opening and closing around a bright bead, and each time it appears the figures are a little clearer. A child with a cap too large and a shawl around his shoulders, a man bending to turn something in the coals, a woman lifting a bowl toward someone out of your sight. The singing is not a tune for foot-stamping or clapping. It is a line held level, the words walking forward without ornament, and you realize your own breath has matched it, even and quiet. A dog you cannot see lets out a single questioning note, and then is silent, satisfied for now by the smell you carry of rain and rock and road dust. You touch the place where the letter lies under your coat, feeling its particular flattened weight, like a promise you have checked too many times to be surprised by. There is still the thought that a stranger can be unwelcome when the light fades, but it swims now in the calmer water of custom, and the fire's presence steadies your steps. At the edge of the green you pause, not wanting to break the shape of what is happening, not wanting to step too hard on a thread that has been woven since before you were born. The flames ascend with a decorous grace, wrapping a poplar's trunk in warmth that stops just short of singeing, and the heat on your skin eases a shiver you did not know you carried from the ridge wind. Faces turn toward you, not quickly, but in the way wheat turns when the breeze changes, the movement spreading across the gathered circle more by suggestion than by signal. You lower your eyes for a moment to take off your hat and smooth the roads miles from your expression, the way you might sweep dust from a stone before setting your chisel, and then you lift your gaze again, letting your posture say what your tongue holds in reserve, that you ask for no more than a place at the outer ring while the prayers finish. Somewhere within the group a log shifts and the embers sigh, and an older man makes the sign across his chest without looking away from the fire. Hunger presses lightly, more a reminder than a demand, and fatigue answers it with an equal softness, like a beam elastic under weight but not yet bowed. In the spaces between the sung lines you hear small things, the whisper of wool against wool, the tick of sap, the faint rustle of leaves in the churchyard trees, and these sounds braid themselves around your patience, holding you where you stand. For a breath, it is as if the whole village and the land around it are waiting to see which way you will lean, and you find that you are content to lean nowhere, not yet, and let the evening itself invite you, if it will. You step from the cart-rutted path onto the village green, and slow where the warmth first touches your shins, the space between you and the ring of people still a pale band of cold. The fire breathes in gusts, drawing air from the hollows and sending a lace of sparks up into the deepening blue, and the tiled roofs around you hold the light in their wet sheen. A hymn moves across the green in a low, even current, words half familiar from chapels and wayside shrines, held steady by a priest's voice that never rises and never falters. The bell has already fallen silent, yet its last stroke seems to hang in the rafters of the evening, as if timbers could remember sound. Chestnut smoke threads through the woodsmoke, sweet and mealy, and you can almost taste the grove you walked past at midday when the burrs cracked under your heel. Your legs hum with the long road, but you keep still, letting the quiet of the gathering enter you the way warmth enters a stone. This is All Souls' Night, where the living draw close to the names of the dead, and you feel the old and the new meeting in the fire's centre like two hands clasping. Here in Auvergne, where villages tuck themselves under old volcanoes and fields, keep their walls of lava rock, the people kindle these flames each November, calling them brandons de mort or feux de la Toussaint, without argument over which word is the truer one. The ring stands loose and respectful, not for fear of sparks, but for the solemn traffic of memory that passes between flame and face. You see a woman touch her shawl and whisper a name. You see a man with a cap held in both hands the way he might hold a tool. Near the priest's elbow a boy turns a blackened pan where chestnuts hop and sing in their shells, and beside him a jug of the year's thin wine rests in the grass, its glass catching the light like a small, tame ember. You have seen other villages carry coals home in lidded pots after such a fire, setting them on the threshold to take the chill out of the entrance, then tucking a single coal into the hearth ash so that the household flame would not be fatherless in the morning. No one names this superstition. They name it care, and you recognize in it the same instinct that mends a broken lintel so a door can hang straight. Faces lift and tilt as your presence presses at the circle's edge like a new wind, and you meet their glances as you would meet a beam you hope will hold. Some eyes move over you and return to the prayer, others pause and weigh the small inventory you carry on your shoulders and in your hands. Your pack is light with chisels, a square, a mallet wrapped in cloth. Your palms are dry with lime and feldspar. Your boots have taken on the clay of 3 valleys since dawn. In your coat, against your ribs, the sealed letter sits firm as a stone you have shaped yourself, and whenever you shift your weight, it answers with a quiet tap, as if reminding you to speak when the time comes. You have no coin to build a conversation on, no patron waiting, yet the craft in your bones sits up and shows itself in the way you stand, shoulders square, ready to measure. A woman at the far side of the ring notices the roll of your tool pouch and then returns to the singing. A child turns to look at you and is gently turned back by a gloved hand. You stop where the grass shows the fire's margin, crispy dry and dappled with cinder, and breathe so that the smoke becomes a slow tide you can step with but not against. The priest glances up once, not seeking you but not refusing you, and in that measured look you feel the line of the circle hold, the way a wall holds when the mortar is sound. His black cassock is dusted with ash near the hem. The wool there has taken on the fire's scent the way a barn door takes on rain. A dog slips forward, tests the air around your knees, and lays its head down again, unconcerned. Its master does not call it back, and this, too, feels like a small permission. The song folds into spoken names, the way a stream enters a wider river, and in the pauses before and after each name, you can hear the minute sounds of a village at night, the hinge of a gate settling, the faint shifting of sheep penned in their stone folds at the green's far side. You keep your hands open at your sides so the fingers are visible and empty. The universal language of a traveller who asks for nothing more immediate than a place at the edge of the light. All around, the green holds its breath, and then exhales, as if the grass itself participates in the prayer, and you stand in that breathing like a stake set true by a careful hand. Your shoulders ease by a small degree as the fire warms through the damp of your coat, and in that easing you allow in the recollection of other fires, other greens, one in a village where a church dome still wore scaffolding after the last campaign, one where a widow asked you to read a letter from her son because your hand is as practiced with ink as it is with stone. The memory of your work, of the steady rhythm of mallet and chisel, acts on you like a blessing spoken under the breath. Not a promise, but a habit of endurance that warms from inside. The priest's measured voice takes on a closing cadence, and at its end the ring relaxes without breaking, the way mortar sets and then releases its moisture into the air. A man shifts, and his shadow leans toward you along the grass. A girl's braid catches an ember's glow, and in the same instant a shutter creaks somewhere on the lane as someone inside the village remembers a name and leans against wood. In that small chorus of household sounds and shared silence, you keep your place, waiting for the invitation that may yet come, the way a coal is lifted from the common fire to bring a hearth to life. You know this night and this fire before anyone speaks to name it, for along these uplands the season carries its own language. In Auvergne and across much of the inland provinces, the brandons des morts, the feux de la Toussaint, rise at the start of November like a second sunset, a living ember against the first hard frosts. The circle tightens and loosens with the wind, shawls and caps lifting in the draught, voices sinking into a cadence that is not performance, but prayer carried outdoors. You can smell wet leaves steaming where sparks fall and hiss, and beneath the wood smoke, a sweetness where chestnuts roast in iron pans balanced on stones. The church's bell has settled, its last note folded into the hum, and the slope of tiled roofs holds the glow like a shallow basin. You stand just beyond the nearest faces, your pack easy on your shoulder, your fingers warmed by the radiance that reaches even this far. Without asking, You recognize your place for now, at the edge where light meets the dark, where strangers wait to be read and named. Here, devotion and custom sit side by side without quarrel, as they have done since before your birth, and likely before your fathers. Names of the departed drift around the blaze, each one released into the air as if handed up to the smoke, while a board set on trestles fills with loaves, roasted chestnuts split and salted, and cups of the year's new wine cloudy in the firelight. A man with blackened tongs draws a coal to one side and sets it in a waiting pot, and a child runs ahead with the lid ajar, proud to carry home the blessing for the family hearth. You watch the little procession complete itself again and again, embers taken away like small suns, to be coaxed into each house's banked ash and encouraged into flame with breath and patience. For people here, this work is not a curiosity to be explained. It is the way winter is entered, by taking the common light and letting it settle in the private stove, and by letting the shared remembrance breathe into rooms where it will be needed. Between the long table and the brand, hands pass bread and fill bowls, and you hear the clack of a spoon on the rim of a pot, steady as a clock with no face. The evening has an order that needs no master of ceremonies, an order learned like a road by walking it each year. You have learned to read walls, mortars, and the way a stone was set by a mason who knew his tools, and the church ahead of you tells a story you can follow even in dimness. Its blocks are dark and porous where the hill gives up lava rock, banded here and there with pale stone pulled from a different quarry, the repairs after bad years written right into the courses. You have seen more than one doorway patched where fire scorched a lintel in the wars that closed the last century, and you have mixed lime and sand to smooth the bite marks left by iron that forced entry when the parish changed hands. In this village, the scars are gentler, but you can still tell which joints were buttered in haste and which were laid at peace, and the sight makes your hands remember their craft without your willing it. The flame in front of you is part of the same work of mending, though no one speaks of it that way. It goes on quietly under the words, turning strangers to neighbors for a night, and turning a bad season from threat into something that can be met. Against the crackle, a woman's voice lists those who have died since the last harvest, and others add names that have waited much longer to be said aloud, each name greeted by a soft murmur and a sign made quickly and without show. The warmth on your palms is the easiest part to feel. But there is another warmth, slower, that gathers in the way the circle stands and the way the flame itself holds steady. Other Novembers come to you while you watch, layered on this one like vellum sheets held to the light. You remember a green above a river farther north, where the brand piled higher than a cart, and the priest wore a travel-stained cloak because his house had not yet been rebuilt, and a low valley near Saint-Flour, where the wind combed sparks into long hair that ran toward the hedges. On a night like this in another parish, you once carried a covered pan for an old woman whose hands shook, walking behind her along a lane where sheep peered between the bars and the smell of damp wool rose like a fog. In a village closer to the big road, a widow asked you to write her boy's name clearly on a scrap to fix above the mantel until spring, and to put into a letter that he should return, or at least send a word by someone who would sign for him. You set your ink on a stool near the fire, and formed letters carefully while men turned chestnuts with their knives, and when the widow could not sign, she pressed her thumb into the soot at the rim of the pan and left her mark at the bottom. Satisfied. In each place you slept warmer because the flame had been shared, and names had been gathered and said, and in each place you rose feeling not a guest of chance but a temporary part of the fabric. Even now, at the edge and unspoken, that thread tugs lightly at your sleeve. The work of continuity does not announce itself, but you can see how it is done in pieces, and you inventory them just as you would a wall before beginning. Stone, mortar, water, and time. Here the pieces are a hymn that keeps to a comfortable range, a row of cups turned upside down to keep the ash out, a bench pulled closer, and a path beaten by feet between the green and each door. A square-shouldered farmer stirs a pot and then steps aside without flair as someone else takes his place, and the motion looks like what you have seen on scaffolds. One hand receiving, one hand passing, no confusion. When a gust pushes the flames sideways, several bodies shift to give room, and a girl laughs once and is shushed with a smile. It is not a festival, but neither is it bleak. Off to your left, a man reaches for a brand, and everyone watches, not with worry but with an old habit of care, making sure the embers go where they should and nowhere else. The priest's cassock is a black cutout near the nave door. He speaks rarely and nods often, and when he raises his hand it seems to include you without pointing to you. Even before anyone brings you bread, you understand that what is being kept is larger than any one house and small enough to fit in 2 cupped palms. You stay where you are a little longer, and the waiting itself becomes part of the rhythm, the breath held between a verse and its echo. Your tools press against your back in their familiar weight, the handle of your hammer nuzzling a rib, the sealed letter at your chest lying flat and warm through the cloth. A boy peeks at you from behind his mother's skirt and is pulled gently forward to put his twig into the rim of the fire, his eyes shining with the same practical solemnity you have seen on faces twice his age. A subtle tilt of heads marks that you have been seen and accounted for, without a gap opening or a sudden hush, and you feel how delicate and strong this weave can be. The blaze burns down a finger's width, and someone rakes the coals so they rest more evenly, red as fruit under a skin. The shovel edges ring soft against stone. In a little while, not yet, someone will make space for you on the bench or press a crust into your hand. But for now the place given is this one, close enough to be warmed, apart enough to see the whole. You take another breath of the air that smells of earth and smoke, and something like bread beginning, and you let the continuity do its patient work. Fire to ember, ember to hearth, village to traveller, year to year. The first kindness comes without announcement, a simple movement at the edge of the flame-lit ring, as a farmer's wife steps forward with a wooden bowl and a heel of bread. Steam lifts from the stew, fragrant with leek and thyme, with the sweetness of carrots and the slow strength of barley, and the scent settles your thoughts the way a hand smooths rumpled cloth. She does not speak, only tilts the bowl into your hands and shifts her shawl to make room near the fire, as if the grass itself has widened to include you. You thank her with a nod and a careful word, and the spoon finds your mouth with a steadiness that surprises you after the day's long climb. Hunger reveals itself in quiet layers. First the heat, then the salt, then the meat's tenderness. And you pace yourself, unwilling to seem ravenous before these watchful faces. Crackling chestnut shells pop at the fire's edge, and the skins curl back to show pale flesh, while smoke threads through the evening like wool drawn out for spinning. A dog inches closer, reassured by the woman's acceptance, and settles at your boot as if it has known you for seasons. You feel the prickle of attention soften, not vanish, and the warmth reaches your fingers before it reaches your name. The first questions arrive on a current of courtesy, put as one might set a pitcher on a table. Where you have come from, what work you follow, whether you read and write as well as set stone. You answer plainly, telling of roads from Brioude and Issoire, of walls lifted straight after long neglect, of letters copied for merchants who preferred numbers to words, and of the silence that falls in a room when a seal is pressed. You add nothing of your empty purse. There is dignity enough in saying that your tools are light because you carry them yourself. A dark-coated figure, the parish priest, moves near with the steadiness of a man used to being consulted at the edge of gatherings, and you offer the sealed parchment from your last employer with 2 fingers and a steady wrist. The wax bears the faint impression of a signet smudged by travel, and you trace it with your thumb before you hand it over, proof against the blunt mistrust that comes with nightfall and unknown faces. The priest does not crack the seal, only weighs the letter in his palm and studies your eyes, your hands, your boots, the honest grime of work ground into the seams. He inclines his head in a gesture that is both permission and blessing, then turns the paper so its unbroken seal faces the firelight before slipping it back to you. With that small assent, space opens around your shoulders the way snow melts from a spring stone, and the ring of bodies, once tight, unknots by a finger's width. The conversation resumes as if you had always stood there, the talk moving in low eddies about lambing and a wall that needs pointing, about the road to Clermont, and whether the river ford will hold through winter rains. Someone passes you a chestnut split neatly along the seam, its heat pulsing through your palm, and another refills your bowl with the last ladle scraped from the pot. Children, drowsy from the long prayers, sag into their mothers' shawls and breathe the sweet, milky breaths of sleep that tame a circle of adults into gentler shapes. New wine, pale and a little sharp, rinses the mouth and carries the taste of hillside terraces, of vines clinging where stone gives way to soil, and you sip without haste. A man with a hat crushed under his arm asks how straight you can bring a door frame in a house that leans, and his smile shows he has asked because he hopes for an answer, not because he doubts your skill. You find the words that belong to your craft, plumb and line, lime putty and rubble core, and the man nods, not as a judge but as a neighbour considering a task already half done. Inch by inch, breath by shared breath, you feel the circle's caution lose its edge, and even the flames seem to burn lower, more securely, as if they too have settled. In the quiet that follows another hymn, the priest mentions that the loft above a barn stands empty tonight, dry as an attic and free of cats if you mind the ladder's last rung. The offer is made with the tone used for weather, not charity, the village measuring out care the way one measures flour. Enough for bread, no spoon wasted. You accept with a nod that holds gratitude without flourish, and the woman who fed you first presses the bread heel into your hand again as if to anchor your thanks to something she can see. Around you, the customs of this night continue with a rhythm centuries old and unhurried. A shovel draws the fire's edges inward. A clay pot warms at the coals. A few embers will be carried home to wake sleeping hearths, so no house goes dark. Names are spoken softly, not to raise grief but to tether memory, and you let your own dead pass your lips in the same measured cadence, folded into the murmuring like grain into dough. No one asks more of your past than you give. This is not a night for interrogations, but for the simple inventory of who is present and who is missed. Even your map of worries, so crisp on the ridge at sunset, blurs at the damp edges, becoming a pattern not of threats, but of paths. When you stand to follow the farmer toward the barn, the dog rises with a soft grunt, crosses to its master, and circles twice at his heel, as if counting each footstep and finding them correct. The green underfoot holds the day's chill, and your boots brush dew from the grass, while the great fire sends a last reddening light across the church wall, dressing the stone in a warmth it will not keep. Along the lane, shutters lean in and creak, their iron hinges groaning like old men easing themselves to a bench, and the smell of hay drifts out as a door swings open to admit you both. Inside the barn, the air is sweet with stored grass and the tannic tang of wood, and cattle shift in their stalls with the sleepy, considerate noises of animals who know the night is larger than their needs. A ladder climbs to shadow, its rungs polished by many hands, and the loft above shows as a dark raft of beams holding up the weight of a sky you can no longer see. The farmer gestures upward and warns of a loose board with the same care he might use to warn of a loose word, then wishes you a good rest with a nod as plain as the one that greeted your arrival. Left alone, you stand still a moment, letting silence gather around your ankles like a welling spring before you move. Back on the green, the fire dims to a red geometry, a slow-breathing heart, and figures stir it with a patience learned from winters when wood was dear and light was dearer. A girl wraps a coal in ash and tucks it into a small earthen jar meant for this purpose, the vessel blackened by years of service and carried as carefully as an egg. You think of how such embers will be coaxed to life on hearthstones, their glow nudged into flame by bellows and breath, and you imagine the line running from this common blaze into every cottage, invisible as a thread pulled through cloth. The church stands dark now except for a candle guttering before a side altar, and the bell is silent, its earlier peal folded back into the metal like a taste kept on the tongue. In the loft, straw whispers under your weight as you settle, and the timber above you shows the adze marks of men you might have worked beside had you arrived 10 years earlier, each stroke a signature written in wood. You slide the sealed letter inside your coat again, the paper warmed by your body and by the nearness of acceptance, and you understand that for tonight it will remain only a promise unopened. Sleep waits just beyond your next breath, and the village, having admitted you to its circle, keeps watch without fanfare, as if the green has indeed become a hearth wide enough for all. The loft receives you with the softness of old straw and the close scent of summers stacked under the eaves. You climb the ladder slowly, each rung polished by years of hands and boots, and ease onto a bed of hay that gives with a dry whisper. Overhead the beams run dark and smooth, ribs of a patient animal at rest, and when you stretch out, the timber's sap-sweet breath hovers near your cheek. You lay your tools by your side, hammer wrapped in cloth, chisels nested together, a plumb bob swaddled to keep it from knocking, and you press your coat close to feel the slight firmness where the sealed letter waits at your heart. Somewhere in the shadows, a barn cat rearranges itself with a purr that is more vibration than sound, and then it settles, as if your arrival has completed a small equation of warmth and company. Grain dust, fine as powder, floats in the strip of light that slips between roof tiles, turning slowly, as though time itself has thickened up in the air of this place. From below comes the sweet, warm exhale of cattle, a slow, wet chew, a hoof's soft thud against packed earth, all the labor of the day reduced to steady breath. You let your shoulders sink, straw pricking through your shirt, and find your body aligning along the quiet geometry of the loft. Plank, beam, ridge, sky. The day's walk unspools in you like a rope coiled back into order, and the thought of coins you do not have, of work you hope to find, grows lighter, set down beside your tools for the night. Outside the wooden wall, the village settles into a music that asks nothing and gives much. Sheep bleat in their stone folds with the muffled timbre of wool-covered bells, and once, from far pasture, comes the soft reply of a dog calling itself home. The shutters of the nearest house stir as the wind tests them, then still, and the small iron ring on a latch knocks once, like a single tap from a joiner's mallet. The fire on the green breathes out a long sigh as it collapses inward, oak and beech yielding to coal and ash, the living flame thinning to a dull red that shows itself only when the wind draws a breath in the other direction. You can smell the chestnut grove beyond the last houses, leaves damp and spicy underfoot, and the damp earth rising after a day of footsteps and prayers, a depth of scent like the dark underside of a river stone. In your memory, as easy as tracing a known pattern, you see the circle the villagers made at dusk, hands passing bread and chestnuts and a jug of new wine, prayers spoken into the night as embers flew up and cooled to nothing. In this country they call such flames brandons de mort or feux de la Toussaint, the bright hinge between the living and the dead that opens once a year. And you remember how house by house embers are carried home to coax each hearth into winter, so that no one's fire begins alone. Tonight's coals will seed tomorrow's warmth, and the next day's, an inheritance you can feel as surely as the coat under your cheek. The quiet runs out in thin lines, down the lanes, across the stream, into the folds of the hills, and gathers again under the church roof, where the last people leaving the green walked in to kneel and speak names out loud. In the small hours when the rafters are a darkness you can only feel against your breathing, the bell of matins begins to count the time without urgency. One note, and then another, spaced the way a mason spaces hammer blows to keep from cracking a good stone, the gap as important as the sound. The tone threads through the chinks in the tile and climbs the ladder past your feet, and you register it without rising, the way you might register the plumb line settling straight, quiet and exact. You think of lime slaking in a pit behind a barn like this, of water laid over burned stone until it hisses and steams, and of how it will later take the sand and bind it. You think of walls that need stitching after hard years. The wars that scorched this country not so long ago are not spoken of tonight, not as grievance, not as heat. They are present only in the way a hand learns to heal, the way a village gathers around a fire and then carries it home. In other towns you have slept under similar roofs, listening to similar bells, and you know the pattern in your bones better than you know any one face. The bell marks not only the hour, but the discipline that holds a place together. The priest who nodded at you on the green seems to nod again in your mind. The same steady acceptance of a stranger who will be less a stranger once he has lifted a few stones and put them back in order. A mouse rustles and then goes still, straw whispering along its passage like a brush cleaning a joint, and the barn breathes again with cow and cat and you, 3 creatures warmed by a common roof. The bell stops. The silence does not ring exactly, but it lingers like cool water on the tongue, and sleep closes over you in a single, level course. Dawn comes by degrees so gentle you notice it first as a change in the grain of the dark. The square of pale sky at the roofline turns from black to slate to a thin milk color, and the rafters reappear as if unveiled by a careful hand. The air cools slightly against your face, a small wind exploring the gaps in the tiles, bringing with it the green smell of wet grass and a faint sweetness that might be smoke, might be new milk warming in a pot. Somewhere a door opens and feet cross a threshold, slow and unhurried, and then the soft splash of a bucket lowered into a well sets a rhythm for the morning. You sit up and feel the straw stick lightly to your hair and sleeves, and your tools are where you left them, their weight honest and familiar. The letter is still at your heart, the wax intact. When you climb down, careful as you are climbing up, the barn floor greets you with the good bite of packed earth under the soles of your boots, and the animals turn their calm eyes toward you in recognition that is not quite curiosity. Outside on the green, the bonfire has fallen into a round of ash, scored with cracks like a dried riverbed. But under the grey crust you can see the quiet pulse of red. A thin line of smoke goes up into the morning, straight as a plumb line in this windless hour, and a woman crosses with a small shovel to lift a coal, sheltering it in a clay pan to take home. A child carries a twist of straw to nurse it along, a miniature of last night's larger rite. The coals mark where the circle stood and spoke to those they loved, and the mark is not grief, but continuity, a place you can point to with your whole body and say, here the living and the dead warmed themselves together, and from here the day begins. You breathe once, and then once more, and the road beyond the village feels like part of the same warm line, not a severing. Breakfast smells drift from a doorway. A spoon touches the rim of a bowl, and you know there is a day's work in your hands, and a bed waiting again when it is done. Night settles into its truest shape, and you belong to it as a stone belongs to the hillside. The timbers above you breathe quietly, warmed by the last drift of heat from the day, and the straw beneath your shoulders remembers the weight of harvest hands. Somewhere a ewe shifts in her pen, soft hooves against old boards. Somewhere the hinge of a door murmurs and rests. The village folds itself closed like a book, and you are one leaf among many, held safe between its covers. You feel the slow rhythm that ties you to this place, smoke lifting through the dark like a silent psalm, the bell that counts the hours with a measured hand, the fire outside settling into its red-lit bones. What was bright and reaching is now a hush of coals, patient and sure. In that hush the mind loosens, like a knot worked free by lamplight. Thought after thought falls open, and what remains is the simple weight of breath, the good ache of feet well used, the honest sound of sleep gathering its small wings. This night has a long lineage. Customs move forward through time, the way water finds its runnels on the slope, always returning, always new in the mouth that speaks a prayer, in the hands that pass a bowl. You have walked from ridge to ridge under weathered skies, and still you find the same quiet language spoken here. A portion shared, a place by the warmth, a nod that means we remember, and we make room. The road has been your thought, the hills your patient teachers. They teach by staying. They teach by bearing the weight of each season without complaint, and by accepting what the wind brings. Your craft rests beside you, tools wrapped and faithful, the letter tucked like a seed in its paper pod. Tomorrow will have its own light and its own asking. Tonight offers only what the old prayers offer, rest for the living, rest for the dead, and a fire that begins in one heart and moves, ember to ember, until the circle closes. You are within that circle now. The world narrows to straw and beam, to the tender creak of a settling board, to the near scent of chestnut smoke drifting from house to house. Sleep moves in, unhurried, the way dusk moved over the ridge. It touches your brow, smooths the day from your hands, and leaves you with the quiet conviction that you are kept. Outside, the last coals shine like patient stars that never fall, holding their place until the bell calls the next hour. Inside, breath finds an easy measure, and the hills keep watch. You drift with them, steady as the earth, and the night is kind.